Welcome to Sinister Media, where we delve into the darkest corners of true crime and unexplained phenomena. Tonight, as the veil between worlds grows thin and jack-o'-lanterns flicker in the darkness, we bring you four chilling tales of Halloween horror that are all too real. From demonic rituals gone wrong to tragic accidents and senseless violence, these stories prove that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are human. Lock your doors, turn out the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey into the heart of Halloween terror. You're watching Sinister Media, and these are the Halloween horrors that really happened.
On the morning of October 31st, 1998, the quiet farming community of Oak Harbor, Ohio, awoke to an unseasonably warm Halloween. The sun rose over fields of corn stubble and pumpkin patches, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. For most residents, it promised to be a day of costumes, candy, and seasonal festivities. But for one family, it would mark the beginning of an unthinkable nightmare. The Marsh family lived on a modest farmstead just outside town. John Marsh, 53, was a respected local farmer known for his hard work and generosity. His wife, Lisa Marsh, 46, worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital and was beloved for her kind heart and community involvement. Lisa's son from a previous marriage, Derek Cooper, 23, lived with them. Derek had developmental disabilities, but was known for his sunny disposition and willingness to help anyone in need. As the morning wore on, neighbors began to notice something amiss at the Marsh farm. The usual signs of activity: John's truck pulling out for errands, Lisa leaving for her shift at the hospital, Derek tending to the animals, were conspicuously absent. Around 9:30 a.m., Frank Wilson, who lived on the adjacent property, decided to check in on his neighbors. He'd known the Marshes for years and often shared coffee with John on Saturday mornings. As he approached the farmhouse, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. Something just didn't feel right, Wilson would later tell police. It was too quiet. No TV, no radio, and John's truck was still in the driveway. Wilson knocked on the front door. No answer. He tried the side door, then peered through a window. What he saw inside made his blood run cold. "I saw John on the floor," Wilson recounted, his voice shaking. "There was so much blood. I knew right away he was gone." Wilson immediately called 911. Within minutes, the peaceful country lane was transformed into a chaotic crime scene. Police cars and ambulances screamed down the rural road, lights flashing. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the property as grim-faced officers moved in and out of the house. Inside, investigators discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. John Marsh was found in the living room, having suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Lisa Marsh's body was discovered in the master bedroom, the victim of a brutal beating. Derek Cooper lay in the hallway, also beaten to death. As news of the triple homicide spread, shock and grief rippled through the tight-knit community. Oak Harbor, with a population of just over 2,500, had never seen a crime of this magnitude. Neighbors gathered in small groups, struggling to process the tragedy. "They were such good people," said Mary Thompson, who attended church with the Marshes. "John would give you the shirt off his back. Lisa was always organizing food drives for the needy. And Derek, that boy never met a stranger. Who could do something like this?" As the investigation unfolded, a disturbing answer to that question began to emerge. Attention quickly focused on John Marsh's son from a previous marriage, 22-year-old Eric Marsh. Eric had a long history of mental illness and violent behavior. Court records showed multiple arrests for assault and making threats. He had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia as a teenager and had been in and out of psychiatric facilities for years. "Eric was always a troubled kid," said Thomas Baker, a longtime family friend. "John and Lisa tried everything to help him. Therapy, medication, tough love. Nothing seemed to work." Despite Eric's issues, John and Lisa had maintained a relationship with him, often inviting him to the farm for visits. Neighbors reported seeing Eric at the property as recently as a week before the murders. As police pieced together the events of that Halloween morning, a chilling timeline emerged. They believe Eric arrived at the farm late on October 30th, or in the early morning hours of the 31st. What exactly transpired inside the house may never be known, but the evidence pointed to a sudden and violent confrontation. Based on the forensic evidence, we believe Mr. Marsh was killed first, said Detective Sarah Rodriguez, lead investigator on the case. It appears Mrs. Marsh and Derek Cooper may have been attacked as they tried to intervene or escape. The murder weapons were found at the scene, a .22 caliber rifle belonging to John Marsh and a heavy flashlight. The brutality of the crime shocked even veteran law enforcement officers. In my 25 years on the force, I've never seen anything like it, said Sheriff Michael Brennan. The level of violence was extreme. It's clear the perpetrator was in a state of severe psychological distress. As the sun set on that terrible Halloween, a massive manhunt was underway for Eric Marsh. His description was broadcast on local news stations, and roadblocks were set up on major highways leading out of the area. The FBI was brought in to assist with the investigation. Sightings of Eric began to pour in from across northern Ohio. A clerk at a gas station in Sandusky reported seeing someone matching his description around 11 a.m. Later that afternoon, a couple in Lorain said they spotted Eric at a fast food restaurant. The break in the case came shortly after midnight on November 1st. A motorist on the Ohio Turnpike near Exit 91 reported seeing a man walking along the shoulder of the road. State troopers responded and apprehended Eric Marsh without incident. He was found to be in possession of a handgun, though it was not the murder weapon. Eric Marsh was taken into custody and charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. In the days and weeks that followed, the community of Oak Harbor struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. The funerals for John, Lisa, and Derek were held jointly, with hundreds of mourners packing the local high school gymnasium to pay their respects. "We've lost 3 beautiful souls," Reverend James Patterson said in his eulogy. "John, Lisa, and Derek exemplified the best of our community: hard work, kindness, and an unwavering commitment to family. Their loss leaves a void that can never truly be filled." As the case moved through the legal system, troubling questions arose about how such a tragedy could have been prevented. Mental health advocates pointed to Eric's history of illness and violence as evidence of systemic failures. "This young man clearly needed intensive, long-term treatment," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a psychiatrist specializing in schizophrenia. "Our mental health system is woefully underfunded and ill-equipped to handle severe cases like this. Without proper support and medication compliance, individuals with paranoid delusions can become a danger to themselves and others." Others questioned why Eric had been able to obtain a firearm, given his criminal record and history of institutionalization. "There are laws on the books meant to prevent people with violent mental illnesses from purchasing guns," said Tony Fratto of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. "But the system is full of loopholes and inconsistencies. We need comprehensive reform to keep weapons out of the wrong hands." Eric Marsh's trial began in the summer of 1999. His court-appointed attorney, James Hinton, pursued an insanity defense. "My client has a documented history of severe mental illness," Hinton told the jury in his opening statement. At the time of these tragic events, he was in the grip of a psychotic episode that rendered him incapable of understanding the nature of his actions. Prosecutors, however, argued that Eric's actions showed clear premeditation. "The defendant drove to his father's home with the intention of committing murder," said District Attorney Michael Graves. "He brought a weapon with him. He waited until the family was vulnerable. These are not the actions of someone disconnected from reality." The trial lasted 3 weeks, with expert witnesses testifying about Eric's mental state and the details of the crime scene. John Marsh's daughter from his first marriage, Jennifer Boggs, gave emotional testimony about her lost family members. "My father was a good man who always tried to do right by his family," Boggs said, fighting back tears. "Lisa brought so much joy into his life, and they both adored Derek. Eric took them from us, and for what? It doesn't make sense. It will never make sense." On July 15, 1999, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Eric Marsh guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As Eric was led from the courtroom, he showed no emotion. His final statement to the court was brief and cryptic. "The voices are quiet now, but they'll never really go away." In the years since the Marsh family murders, The community of Oak Harbor has worked to heal and to honor the memory of John, Lisa, and Derek. A scholarship fund was established in Derek Cooper's name to support students with special needs. The local 4-H chapter dedicated their annual Harvest Festival to John and Lisa, citing their years of volunteer work with the organization. For Frank Wilson, the neighbor who discovered the bodies, the trauma of that day lingers. "I still have nightmares about what I saw in that house," he admitted in a recent interview. "But I try to focus on the good memories, John and Lisa waving from their porch, Derek's big laugh. That's how I want to remember them." The case has also had lasting impacts on local law enforcement and mental health services. Sheriff Brennan worked with county officials to establish a crisis intervention team specifically trained to handle situations involving individuals with mental illness. "What happened to the Marsh family was a wake-up call," Brennan said. "We need to do better at identifying and helping troubled individuals before they reach a breaking point. It won't bring John, Lisa, and Derek back, but maybe it can prevent another family from experiencing this kind of tragedy." Dr. Rodriguez, the psychiatrist who commented on the case, has used the Marsh family murders as a case study in her advocacy for mental health reform. Eric Marsh's descent into violence wasn't inevitable, she argued in a recent paper. With proper intervention and consistent treatment, many individuals with severe mental illness can lead stable, productive lives. But that requires a level of support our current system simply doesn't provide. The debate over gun control sparked by the case continues as well. While Ohio has made some changes to its background check system for firearms purchases, advocates argue that more needs to be done. The Marsh family murders highlight the potentially deadly consequences of our patchwork gun laws, said Fratto of the Brady campaign. "We need universal background checks, better reporting of mental health records, and stronger enforcement of existing prohibitions. No family should have to endure what the Marshes did." For Jennifer Boggs, John Marsh's daughter, the years since the murders have been a journey of grief, anger, and eventually, a determination to create something positive from the tragedy. She now works as an advocate for families affected by mental illness and violence. "For a long time, I was consumed by hatred for Eric," Boggs said in a recent interview. "But eventually, I realized that hatred was only hurting me. My dad, Lisa, and Derek were all about love and helping others. The best way to honor them is to try to prevent other families from experiencing this kind of loss." As another Halloween approaches, Oak Harbor prepares for its usual festivities. But for many in the community, the day will always carry a somber undertone. At the local cemetery, 3 graves stand side by side, often adorned with flowers and small mementos left by those who remember. The headstone reads simply, "John Marsh, Lisa Marsh, Derek Cooper, beloved family, forever in our hearts." In the quiet of an autumn evening, as the sun sets over the fields John Marsh once tended, one can almost imagine the family going about their daily lives. John checking the crops, Lisa preparing dinner, Derek's laughter floating on the breeze. Their story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of untreated mental illness and the importance of cherishing our loved ones while we have them. The Marsh family murders changed Oak Harbor forever. But in the face of unimaginable tragedy, the community has demonstrated remarkable resilience, compassion, and a commitment to ensuring their legacy is one of positive change. As one local resident put it, "We can't change what happened, but we can honor John, Lisa, and Derek by taking care of each other and working to build a safer, more compassionate world." That's what they would have wanted.
Unlock the secrets of your darkest dreams. Are you haunted by nightmares that leave you sweating and shaken? Do you wake up in the dead of night, heart pounding, unable to shake off the lingering dread? Fear not, for Sinister's Nightmare Readings and Solutions is here to illuminate the shadows of your subconscious. Our unique service offers both psycho and psychic dream readings, providing unparalleled insight into your most terrifying nocturnal visions. Our team of expert dream analysts will delve deep into the murky waters of your mind, decoding the hidden messages and symbols lurking within your nightmares. But we don't stop at mere interpretation. For a small additional fee, our skilled practitioners will craft personalized solutions to banish your nightmares and restore peaceful slumber. Whether it's confronting your deepest fears or reprogramming your dream state, we have the tools to transform your nights from horror shows to blissful escapades. Don't let another restless night pass you by. Take control of your dreams and conquer your fears with Sinister's nightmare readings and solutions. Your journey to understanding begins now. Ready to face your nightmares head-on? Click the link in the description to book your reading today and use code SinisterMedia for 10% off your first session. Sweet dreams await. Or do they?
On the night of October 31st, 1991, the small town of Oakwood, Texas, became the epicenter of a chilling event that would reignite fears of satanic cults and occult practices across the region. What began as a typical Halloween evening in this quiet community of 3,000 residents quickly descended into a nightmare that would haunt the town for years to come. Oakwood had always prided itself on its strong sense of community and traditional values. Halloween was usually a time of innocent fun, children trick-or-treating, teenagers attending costume parties, and families gathering for festive dinners. But this year, something sinister was brewing beneath the surface of small-town tranquility. The trouble began around 10:30 p.m. when local farmer John Thompson was driving home after a late-night run to the feed store. As he passed by the old Oakwood cemetery on the outskirts of town, something caught his eye, flickering lights coming from deep within the graveyard. At first, I thought it might be some kids playing a Halloween prank, Thompson would later tell investigators. But something about it just didn't feel right. It was too organized, too deliberate. Concerned, Thompson pulled over and called the Oakwood Police Department from the payphone at a nearby gas station. Deputy Sarah Martinez was the first to respond to the call. Dispatch said it was probably just teenagers messing around, Martinez recalled, but given it was Halloween night, and with all the stories you hear, I decided to check it out myself. As Martinez approached the cemetery, she immediately sensed that this was no ordinary teenage hangout. The flickering lights Thompson had reported turned out to be candles, dozens of them, arranged in a large circle among the gravestones. And in the center of that circle, "I'll never forget what I saw," Martinez said, her voice still shaking years later. "There were 5 of them, all in black robes. They were chanting something I couldn't understand, and there was blood. So much blood." What Deputy Martinez had stumbled upon was a group of local teenagers in the midst of what appeared to be an occult ritual. At the center of their circle lay the mutilated carcasses of several small animals, cats, rabbits, and at least one dog. The teens were using the animals' blood to draw strange symbols on the gravestones and on their own faces and bodies. Horrified, Martinez called for backup. Within minutes, several more officers arrived on the scene, including Police Chief Robert Grayson. "In all my years on the force, I'd never seen anything like it," Grayson would later tell reporters. "These were kids we knew, good kids from good families. How could they be involved in something like this?" The 5 teenagers were quickly apprehended. They offered no resistance, seeming almost in a trance-like state. As they were led away in handcuffs, one of them, later identified as 17-year-old Michael Hartley, began to laugh hysterically. "You're too late," he reportedly told the officers. "The master is coming. He's going to cleanse this town with fire and blood." The arrested teens were identified as Michael Hartley, Lisa Simmons, Tyler Jackson, Emily Chun, and David Rodriguez. All were students at Oakwood High School, ranging in age from 16 to 18. None of them had any prior criminal records or history of troublemaking. As news of the arrests spread, Oakwood was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. Parents struggled to understand how their children could be involved in such a horrific act. Teachers and classmates described the 5 as normal, well-adjusted teenagers. There were no obvious signs of trauma or abuse that might explain their actions. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together a disturbing picture of what had led to that Halloween night ritual. It seemed to have begun several months earlier when Michael Hartley, the apparent ringleader, had become obsessed with occult literature and practices. Michael always had an interest in the supernatural. His mother, Karen Hartley, told police through tears, but it was just harmless stuff. Ghost stories, Ouija boards. "I never thought," "I never imagined it would lead to this." According to statements from the other teens involved, Michael had gradually drawn them into his world of occult fascination. What started as late-night storytelling sessions and attempts to conjure spirits soon escalated into more sinister activities. Lisa Simmons, in her police interview, described how Michael had convinced them that they could gain supernatural powers through animal sacrifice. "He said it was the only way to prove our devotion," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That if we did this, we'd be able to control people's minds, to shape reality itself." The group had been planning the Halloween ritual for weeks, stealing pets from neighboring towns to avoid suspicion in Oakwood. They chose the cemetery for its mystical energy and because Halloween night was supposed to be when the veil between worlds was thinnest. As the investigation unfolded, the incident sparked a firestorm of controversy and fear in Oakwood and beyond. Local religious leaders denounced the teens' actions as pure evil, calling for harsh punishment and increased vigilance against satanic influences. Reverend Thomas Parker of the First Baptist Church of Oakwood led a series of prayer vigils in the town square. "We must root out this darkness that has taken hold of our children," he thundered from his pulpit. "The devil walks among us, seeking to corrupt the innocent. We must be ever watchful." The media descended on Oakwood, with reporters from as far away as New York and Los Angeles clamoring for interviews and exclusive footage. National news programs ran sensationalized segments on the satanic scourge of small-town America, often featuring grainy reenactments of the cemetery ritual. This media frenzy, combined with the shocking nature of the crime itself, reignited fears of widespread satanic activity that had gripped much of the country in the 1980s. The so-called Satanic Panic had largely died down by 1991, but the Oakwood incident breathed new life into the phenomenon. Parents across Texas and neighboring states began scrutinizing their children's behavior for signs of occult involvement. Sales of books on recognizing and combating satanic influence skyrocketed. Some schools banned certain types of music and clothing associated with dark subcultures. In Oakwood itself, the aftermath of the incident tore at the fabric of the community. Families of the accused teens faced ostracism and threats. The Hartleys eventually moved away after their house was vandalized multiple times. Emily Chen's parents, Chinese immigrants who ran the local Chinese restaurant, saw their business nearly ruined as customers stayed away. The legal proceedings against the 5 teenagers were complicated by their age and the unprecedented nature of the crime in Oakwood. Prosecutors initially sought to try them as adults, citing the premeditated nature of the ritual and the cruelty involved in the animal killings. Defense attorneys argued that the teens had been under the influence of Michael Hartley's manipulative personality and should be considered victims themselves. They pushed for the case to be handled in juvenile court, emphasizing the possibility of rehabilitation. In the end, a compromise was reached. Michael Hartley, as the ringleader and the oldest at 18, would be tried as an adult. The other 4 would be processed through the juvenile system, but with the possibility of extended supervision into their adult years. The trials, held in the spring of 1992, captivated the region. Prosecutors painted a picture of calculated evil, describing in graphic detail the ritual preparations and the suffering of the animals. They argued that the teens represented a genuine threat to society if not severely punished. The defense team, led by renowned attorney James Callahan, took a different approach. They brought in experts on adolescent psychology and the power of group dynamics to explain how normal teenagers could be led so far astray. "These are not hardened criminals," Callahan told the jury in his closing argument for Michael Hartley's trial. "They are confused, misguided young people who got caught up in something they didn't truly understand. They need help and guidance, not to be thrown away." In June 1992, the verdicts were finally announced. Michael Hartley was found guilty of animal cruelty, desecration of a cemetery, and contributing to the delinquency of minors. He was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with mandatory counseling and psychiatric treatment. The other 4 teens were adjudicated delinquent, the juvenile court equivalent of a guilty verdict, on similar charges. They were committed to a juvenile detention facility for a minimum of 2 years, with their cases to be reviewed annually until they turned 21. The sentencing brought a measure of closure to Oakwood, but the scars of that Halloween night ran deep. The town struggled to shake off the stigma of being known as the site of a satanic ritual. Tourism, a significant part of the local economy, dropped sharply in the years following the incident. Efforts to heal the community met with mixed success. Some residents, like schoolteacher Mary Donovan, worked tirelessly to promote understanding and forgiveness. "These were our children," Donovan said at a town hall meeting in 1993. "We failed them somehow. Now we have a responsibility to learn from this and do better." Others remained convinced that a broader conspiracy of satanic influence was at work. A group calling itself Oakwood Parents for a Godly Community formed in the wake of the trials, lobbying for stricter monitoring of teenagers' activities and the removal of certain books from school libraries. As the years passed, the intensity of emotion surrounding the incident gradually faded. The teens served their sentences and were eventually released. Michael Hartley, upon leaving prison in 1997, expressed deep remorse for his actions and the pain he had caused the community. "I was young and stupid," he told a local reporter in a rare interview. "I thought I was tapping into some great power, but all I did was hurt people and animals. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that." The other four took different paths after their release. Lisa Simmons went on to become a counselor, working with troubled teens. Tyler Jackson joined the military. Emily Chin left Oakwood as soon as she could, eventually becoming a successful software engineer in California. David Rodriguez struggled with substance abuse for years before finding stability as a long-haul truck driver. Today, more than 3 decades after that fateful Halloween night, Oakwood has largely moved on from the incident. The old cemetery where the ritual took place has been renovated, with a small memorial plaque acknowledging the animals that lost their lives there. The town's Halloween celebrations are more subdued than they once were, but children still trick-or-treat, and families still gather for harvest festivals. The shadow of that night in 1991 has faded, but it has not disappeared entirely. For those who lived through it, the police officers, the parents, the teenagers themselves, the memory remains vivid. It serves as a reminder of how quickly fear and misunderstanding can take hold, and of the importance of community, compassion, and critical thinking in the face of the unknown. The Oakwood incident, sensationalized as it was at the time, ultimately became a case study in the complex interplay of adolescent psychology, group dynamics, and societal fears. It highlighted the dangers of moral panics and the need for a measured, evidence-based approach to unusual or disturbing events. In the end, the true horror of that Halloween night in Oakwood was not some supernatural evil, but the very human capacity for belief to override reason, for fear to cloud judgment, and for misguided passion to lead to genuine harm. It stands as a cautionary tale, not of demonic influence, but of the demons that can arise from within our own communities when understanding and compassion fail. As Oakwood continues to heal and grow, the lessons of that long-ago Halloween remain relevant, a reminder that the real work of building a strong community lies not in rooting out imagined evils, but in fostering connection, support, and open dialogue among all its members. On October 31, 1997, the picturesque town of Whitefield, New Hampshire, became the site of one of the most horrific mass shootings in the state's history. The Spalding Inn, a charming 19th-century hotel known for its quaint atmosphere and stunning views of the White Mountains, transformed from a place of relaxation and celebration into a scene of unimaginable terror. The Spalding Inn had been a fixture in Whitefield since 1861, weathering wars, economic depressions, and the changing tides of tourism. Under the ownership of Martha Caldwell, a sprightly septuagenarian whose family had run the inn for 3 generations, the Spalding had become famous for its annual Halloween bash. Each year, guests from across New England would flock to the inn, drawn by promises of elaborate decorations, live music, and Martha's famous pumpkin pie. The evening of October 31, 1997, began like any other Halloween at the Spalding. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a haunted forest, complete with fake trees, billowing fog machines, and twinkling fairy lights. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from every corner, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the revelers' costumes. Among the guests that night was Thomas Aldridge, a 42-year-old software engineer from Boston. Aldridge had checked in 2 days earlier, telling the front desk he was looking for some peace and quiet. Other guests and staff would later recall that Aldridge seemed agitated and withdrawn, spending most of his time in his room or taking long walks in the woods surrounding the inn. What no one at the Spalding knew was that Aldridge had recently lost his job, was going through a bitter divorce, and had a history of mental health issues. He had stopped taking his prescribed medication weeks earlier, convinced that he no longer needed it. As the party downstairs reached its zenith around 10:30 p.m., with costumed guests dancing to Monster Mash and bobbing for apples, Aldridge sat alone in his third-floor room. According to his later confession, it was the sound of laughter drifting up from the ballroom that finally broke him. "I couldn't stand their happiness," he told investigators. "Why did they get to be happy when my whole life was falling apart?" What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone at the Spalding Inn that night. Aldridge retrieved a 9mm handgun from his luggage, a weapon he had brought with thoughts of self-harm, not violence against others. But in his delusional state, fueled by alcohol and untreated mental illness, his pain turned outward. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Aldridge left his room and made his way downstairs. Witnesses would later describe him as moving with an eerie calm, his face expressionless as he entered the packed ballroom. The first shot rang out at 10:52 p.m., according to the inn's security cameras. In the raucous atmosphere of the party, many guests initially mistook the sound for a balloon popping or part of the Halloween theatrics. It wasn't until people began to fall that the horrible reality set in. Panic erupted as Aldridge methodically made his way through the ballroom, firing indiscriminately into the crowd. Costumed partygoers scrambled for exits, many tripping over discarded props or each other in their desperation to escape. Among the first to fall was Brian McKenzie, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher dressed as Dracula. He had been manning the apple bobbing station when Aldridge entered. Witnesses say McKenzie tried to reason with the shooter, raising his hands in a placating gesture before being struck by multiple bullets. Martha Caldwell, the inn's beloved owner, had been serving her famous pumpkin pie when the shooting began. Despite her advanced age, she demonstrated remarkable courage, shepherding guests towards the kitchen's back exit even as chaos reigned around her. Tragically, Martha was shot in the back as she held the door open for others to escape. She died en route to the hospital. As the minutes ticked by, the ballroom transformed from a scene of celebration to one of carnage. Jack-o'-lanterns lay smashed on the floor, their candles sputtering out in pools of fake fog and very real blood. The haunting strains of Thriller continued to play from the abandoned DJ booth, providing a surreal soundtrack to the unfolding horror. Local law enforcement, alerted by frantic 911 calls from escaping guests, arrived on the scene at 11:07 p.m. Officer Sarah Jennings, first to enter the inn, would later describe the scene as like walking into a war zone. "There were bodies everywhere," Jennings recalled in a later interview. "The smell of gunpowder mixed with fake fog and spilled drinks. And in the middle of it all was this man, just standing there with the gun hanging at his side, looking lost." Aldridge offered no resistance when police apprehended him. According to Officer Jennings, his only words upon being handcuffed were, "I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it." The final toll of Aldridge's rampage was devastating: 12 dead, including Martha Caldwell, and 27 injured. Among the deceased were newlyweds celebrating their first Halloween as a married couple, a group of college students from nearby Plymouth State University, and a young mother who had left her 2-year-old daughter with a babysitter to enjoy a rare night out. In the days and weeks that followed, the tiny town of Whitefield struggled to come to terms with the tragedy that had struck their community. The Spalding Inn, once a source of pride and economic stability for the area, now stood as a grim reminder of how quickly life can change. Grief counselors were brought in to help survivors and family members cope with the trauma. Candlelight vigils were held nightly on the town green, drawing mourners from across New England. The local high school gymnasium was transformed into a makeshift memorial, its walls covered with photos of the victims and messages of love and support. As the initial shock began to fade, questions arose about how such a tragedy could have occurred. How had Aldridge been able to bring a weapon into the inn undetected? Could more have been done to recognize and address his mental state before it escalated to violence? The incident sparked renewed debate about gun control laws in New Hampshire, traditionally known for its relatively lax firearm regulations. Advocates for stricter measures pointed to the Spalding Massacre as evidence of the need for more comprehensive background checks and limits on concealed carry permits. Mental health experts used the case to highlight the importance of consistent treatment and the dangers of abruptly stopping medication. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a psychiatrist who reviewed Aldridge's medical history, told reporters, "This tragedy underscores the critical need for better mental health resources and follow-up care." Mr. Aldridge's descent into violence was not inevitable, but the result of a system that failed to adequately support him. For the survivors, the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. Many struggled with PTSD, unable to escape the memories of that horrific night. Sarah Collins, a 23-year-old who had been working as a waitress at the party, found herself unable to enter crowded spaces or attend any kind of celebration for years afterward. "Halloween used to be my favorite holiday," Collins said in a 2007 interview. "Now, the sight of a pumpkin is enough to trigger a panic attack. It's like that night stole a piece of my soul." The legal proceedings against Thomas Aldridge moved swiftly. Given the overwhelming evidence and Aldridge's own confession, prosecutors sought the maximum penalty. In a trial that captured national attention, Aldridge was found guilty on 12 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. During the sentencing phase, family members of the victims were given the opportunity to address the court. Their statements painted vivid portraits of lives cut tragically short and the ripple effects of loss that extended far beyond that Halloween night. Jennifer McKenzie, widow of Brian McKenzie, spoke of her husband's dedication to his students and his dream of starting a family, a dream now forever unfulfilled. Brian believed in the goodness of people, she told the court, her voice breaking. Even in his last moments, he tried to help. That was who he was, and that's who this world lost. Martha Caldwell's grandson, Michael, spoke of his grandmother's love for the Spalding Inn and the community it served. "The inn was her life," he said. "She poured her heart and soul into making it a place of joy and welcome for everyone who came through its doors. It's a cruel irony that she died protecting the guests she loved so much." Aldridge himself spoke briefly before sentencing, expressing remorse for his actions but offering little in the way of explanation. "I can't take back what I did," he told the court. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that someday, somehow, some good can come from this terrible thing I've done." On June 15, 1998, Thomas Aldridge was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led from the courtroom, the families of his victims watched in silence, many holding hands or embracing, finding solace in shared grief. In the years since the Spalding Inn Massacre, Whitefield has worked hard to heal and to honor the memory of those lost. The inn itself, too laden with painful memories to continue as a hotel, was eventually donated to the town by the Caldwell family. After much debate and consultation with victims' families, it was decided to transform the property into a community center and memorial garden. Today, the Spalding Community Center stands as a testament to resilience and the power of a community to come together in the face of tragedy. The ballroom where so many lost their lives has been converted into a state-of-the-art library, filled with light and the quiet murmur of readers. Martha's Kitchen, where she once baked her famous pies, now hosts cooking classes for local youth. The Memorial Garden, occupying the inn's former back lawn, is a place of quiet reflection. 12 maple trees, one for each victim, stand in a circle around a small pond. Plaques bearing the names and stories of those lost line the walking path, ensuring that their memories live on. Every Halloween, the community comes together for a candlelight vigil in the garden. It's a somber affair, but one tinged with hope and a celebration of life. In recent years, survivors have begun to attend, finding healing in the shared remembrance. The events of October 31, 1997, left an indelible mark on Whitefield and on all those touched by the tragedy. But from the depths of that horror, a story of human resilience and the strength of community has emerged. The Spalding Inn Massacre serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of untreated mental illness and easy access to firearms. But it also stands as a testament to the capacity of people to come together, to support one another, and to find light even in the darkest of circumstances. As Sarah Collins, the former waitress who struggled for so long with the aftermath, said at the 20th anniversary memorial service, "What happened here was a tragedy beyond words. But what's happened since? The way this community has supported each other, the way we've refused to let hate and fear win. That's the real story of the Spalding Inn. That's the legacy we choose to carry forward." In Whitefield, Halloween is still celebrated, though perhaps more solemnly than in years past. Jack-o'-lanterns still grin from porches, children still trick-or-treat, and the spirit of the season endures. But now it carries with it a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life and the strength found in unity. The Spalding Inn may be gone, but the heart of the community it once served beats stronger than ever, a living memorial to those lost on that terrible night and a beacon of hope for the future.
In a world that never stops, find your sanctuary in somewhere quiet, the gripping new film now streaming exclusively on Amazon Prime. This mesmerizing tale follows Sarah, a successful but burnt-out executive, as she embarks on a solo retreat to reconnect with herself and escape the chaos of modern life. But as Sarah delves deeper into the serene wilderness, she discovers that true silence can be deafening. The tranquil facade of her idyllic getaway begins to crack, revealing a web of mysteries and long-buried secrets. With each passing day, the line between reality and illusion blurs, challenging Sarah's perception and pushing her to confront the demons she thought she'd left behind. Somewhere Quiet masterfully blends psychological suspense with breathtaking cinematography, inviting viewers to question the nature of solitude and the price of peace. As Sarah's journey unfolds, you'll find yourself on the edge of your seat, wondering if the quiet she seeks will be her salvation or her undoing. Featuring a tour de force performance by rising star Emily Clark, Somewhere Quiet is a must-watch for fans of thought-provoking thrillers and anyone who's ever dreamed of escaping it all. Ready to embark on this unforgettable journey? Click the link in the description to start watching Somewhere Quiet on Amazon Prime now. Your escape is just one click away.
On the evening of October 26, 1996, the small town of Newfield, Maine, was buzzing with excitement. The annual Halloween Hayride, organized by the Newfield Apple Orchard, was a beloved tradition that drew families and teenagers from across York County. Little did anyone know that this year's event would end in tragedy, forever changing the lives of those involved and sending shockwaves through the tight-knit community. The Newfield Apple Orchard, owned by the Johnson family for 3 generations, had been hosting the Halloween Hayride for over a decade. It had grown from a small local attraction to a regional draw, with visitors coming from as far as Portland to experience the thrills and chills of the haunted trail. As dusk settled over the orchard that Saturday, the air was crisp with autumn chill and alive with the sound of laughter and excited chatter. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the path to the hayride's starting point, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows in the gathering darkness. Among those eagerly waiting in line were best friends Sarah Thompson and Mike Rodriguez, both 16. They had been looking forward to the hayride for weeks, planning their costumes and speculating about the scares that awaited them on the trail. "This is going to be epic," Sarah grinned, adjusting her witch's hat. Mike nodded, his vampire cape fluttering in the breeze. "I heard they've got a new chainsaw guy this year," he said. "Bet I don't even flinch." Behind them, 15-year-old twins Emily and Ethan Parker whispered excitedly, their matching zombie makeup making them almost indistinguishable in the dim light. It was their first time on the hayride without their parents, a small taste of independence that felt thrilling and just a little bit scary. As the line moved forward, 17-year-old Jason Lee, a star player on the Newfield High School football team, caught up with his girlfriend, Lisa Chin. "Sorry I'm late," he said, planting a kiss on her cheek. "Coach kept us late at practice." Lisa rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "You're lucky you're cute," she teased. At the front of the line, Robert Johnson, the orchard's owner, was helping guests climb aboard the hay wagons. His weathered face crinkled into a smile as he assisted a young boy dressed as a pirate. "Hold on tight, matey," he said with a wink. "There be monsters in these woods." The hayride consisted of several wagons pulled by tractors, each filled with hay bales for seeding and decorated with corn stalks and fake cobwebs. As each wagon filled up, it would depart down the trail, winding through the orchard and into the surrounding woods where costumed actors waited to provide scares. Sarah, Mike, the Parker twins, Jason, and Lisa all ended up on the same wagon, along with about a dozen other teens and a few younger children accompanied by parents. As their tractor lurched forward, driven by Robert's son, 19-year-old Tom Johnson, excited squeals and nervous laughter filled the air. The first part of the ride was tame enough, with a few jump scares from actors dressed as classic monsters lurking among the apple trees. But as they entered the wooded section of the trail, the atmosphere grew more ominous. Fog machines created an eerie mist, and strobe lights disoriented the riders, making the costumed ghouls seem to appear and disappear at random. It was as they rounded a particularly sharp bend in the trail that disaster struck. Later investigations would reveal that a combination of factors led to the tragedy: a poorly maintained section of the trail, an inexperienced driver, and terrible timing. As Tom Johnson steered the tractor around the bend, the wagon's wheels caught in a deep rut. The sudden jolt, combined with the weight of the passengers, caused the wagon to tip precariously. Panicked screams replaced the excited shrieks of moments before his riders clung to each other and the hay bales. In that crucial moment, as Tom struggled to regain control, fate dealt another cruel blow. A tractor-trailer truck, which had no business being on the narrow country road that ran parallel to the trail, came barreling around a blind corner. The truck driver, later identified as 42-year-old Frank Miller, had been lost and was trying to find his way back to the main highway. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. Miller, seeing the hayride emerge from the woods, slammed on his brakes. But the truck's momentum, combined with the gravel road's loose surface, sent it into a skid. As the hayride passengers watched in horror, the massive vehicle jackknifed it, its trailer swinging directly into their path. The impact was catastrophic. The wagon was torn from the tractor, flipping over and spilling its passengers onto the road and into the surrounding woods. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass mixed with screams of pain and fear, echoing through the once peaceful forest. In the chaotic aftermath, those who were able scrambled to help the injured. Sarah Thompson, who had been thrown clear of the wreck, found herself kneeling beside Mike Rodriguez, who lay unnaturally still, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. "Mike, please," she sobbed, shaking him gently. "Please wake up." Jason Lee, despite a broken arm, managed to pull Lisa Chun and several others away from the smoldering wreckage of the truck, which had come to rest on its side. The Parker twins, Emily and Ethan, clung to each other in shock, their zombie makeup now mixed with very real blood and dirt. Emergency services arrived on the scene within minutes, alerted by frantic 911 calls from both participants and staff members further back on the trail. The sight that greeted them was one of utter devastation. Injured teens and children lay scattered across the area, some still tangled in hay and the remnants of their costumes. As ambulances began transporting the wounded to nearby hospitals, the grim task of assessing casualties began. 4 teenagers had lost their lives in the accident: Mike Rodriguez, Lisa Chin, and 2 others who had been seated in the part of the wagon that took the brunt of the impact. Dozens more were injured, some critically. The news spread quickly through Newfield and surrounding towns. Parents rushed to the scene and to hospitals, desperate for information about their children. The small community, which had never experienced a tragedy of this scale, was plunged into shock and grief. In the days that followed, as the full extent of the disaster became clear, questions began to arise. How could this have happened? Who was responsible? The investigation that ensued would uncover a series of oversights and failures that had culminated in that deadly moment on the trail. It emerged that the section of trail where the accident occurred had been flagged for maintenance earlier in the season, but that repairs had been postponed due to budget constraints. Tom Johnson, while a competent farmhand, had limited experience driving the tractor with a full wagon of passengers, especially on the more challenging parts of the trail. The presence of the tractor trailer on the back road was also scrutinized. Frank Miller, the truck driver, admitted to using a non-approved route in an attempt to make up time on his delivery schedule. His company's policies strictly prohibited the use of such roads for precisely this reason. As the investigation unfolded, the community grappled with its grief. Makeshift memorials appeared outside Newfield High School, where all 4 of the deceased teens had been students. Candlelight vigils were held nightly, bringing together mourners from across the county. The funerals, held over the course of a week, were heart-wrenching affairs. Mike Rodriguez was remembered for his quick wit and kind heart, Lisa Chun for her academic achievements and dreams of becoming a doctor. The other 2 victims, both juniors at Newfield High, were honored for their contributions to the school's music program and volunteer work. For the survivors, the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. Many faced extensive physical therapy and multiple surgeries. The psychological scars, for some, proved even more difficult to heal. Sarah Thompson, who had watched her best friend die before her eyes, struggled with severe PTSD and survivor's guilt. Jason Lee, once a rising football star, found his athletic dreams derailed by his injuries. The Parker twins, though physically recovered, became withdrawn and anxious, their carefree youth seemingly stolen in a single, terrible moment. The legal fallout from the accident was extensive. The Johnson family and their orchard faced multiple lawsuits from victims' families. The trucking company that employed Frank Miller was also named in several suits. The cases would drag on for years, reopening wounds and forcing the community to relive the tragedy again and again. Robert Johnson, devastated by the loss of life and the role his business had played in the accident, made a public apology to the victims and their families. "No words can express the depth of our sorrow," he said, his voice breaking. "We accept full responsibility for our failures, and we are committed to doing whatever we can to support those affected by this terrible tragedy." The Halloween Hayride accident led to significant changes in safety regulations for seasonal attractions in Maine. New guidelines were implemented for trail maintenance, driver training, and emergency preparedness. Many similar events across the state voluntarily shut down or underwent extensive safety reviews. For the town of Newfield, the healing process was slow but steady. The community came together in remarkable ways, supporting the affected families and honoring the memories of those lost. A scholarship fund was established in the names of the 4 deceased teens, providing educational opportunities for future Newfield High School graduates. 5 years after the accident, on its anniversary, a permanent memorial was unveiled in Newfield's town square. For young apple trees, symbolizing the lives cut short, were planted around a simple stone marker bearing the names of the victims. It became a place of reflection and remembrance, a testament to the town's resilience and the enduring impact of that fateful night. As the years passed, the raw pain of the tragedy gradually gave way to a more nuanced grief. Those who had been on the hayride that night found different ways to cope and move forward. Sarah Thompson, after years of therapy, became an advocate for mental health awareness. Jason Lee, unable to return to football, discovered a passion for coaching and began working with youth sports programs. The Parker twins, Emily and Ethan, found healing through art, creating a series of paintings that dealt with themes of loss and recovery. Their work was featured in a special exhibit at the Portland Museum of Art, drawing attention to the long-term effects of trauma on young people. For Tom Johnson, the young man who had been driving the tractor, the accident's impact was profound. Overwhelmed by guilt, he left Newfield shortly after the legal proceedings concluded. Years later, he would return, dedicated to promoting farm safety and working to prevent similar tragedies. The Newfield apple orchard never hosted another Halloween hayride. Instead, the Johnsons transformed their October events into a harvest festival focused on family-friendly, ground-based activities. A portion of the proceeds each year goes to local emergency services and trauma recovery programs. Today, more than 2 decades after the accident, its effects can still be felt in Newfield and the surrounding communities. Halloween is observed more solemnly than in many places, with an emphasis on safety and remembrance alongside the traditional festivities. The tragedy serves as a stark reminder of how quickly joy can turn to sorrow and of the importance of safety precautions in even the most seemingly innocent of activities. But it also stands as a testament to the strength of a community united in grief and determined to honor the memories of those lost by building a safer, more compassionate world. As one Newfield resident put it on the 20th anniversary of the accident, "We'll never forget that night, or the young lives we lost. but we choose to remember them not just in sadness, but in our commitment to each other and to making sure a tragedy like this never happens again. In that way, their legacy lives on in every life we touch, in every safety measure we implement, in every act of kindness we show to one another. The Halloween Hayride Accident of 1996 remains a defining moment in Newfield's history, a tragedy that shook the community to its core but also revealed its deep reserves of resilience, compassion, and hope.
And there you have it, folks, 4 true stories that will haunt your Halloween nightmares for years to come. The Marsh Family Murders, the Devil Worship Incident, the Spalding Inn Massacre, and the Halloween Hayride Accident all serve as grim reminders that real-life horrors can be far more disturbing than any ghost story or urban legend. As you go about your Halloween festivities this year, take a moment to remember those who lost their lives in these tragic events. And always remember, the real monsters don't wear masks or costumes. They walk among us, waiting for their moment to strike. This has been Sinister Media. Sleep tight, and don't let the bedbugs, or anything else, bite. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more true crime and unexplained mysteries. Until next time, stay sinister.